Welcome to Life Stories, where we share tales that touch the heart and inspire the soul. Today's story is about Megan, a mother of triplets who faced unimaginable hardships after being abandoned by the man she thought she loved. Through resilience, courage, and the kindness of strangers, Megan found her way from despair to hope, rebuilding her life and creating a future for her children. It's a journey of heartbreak, determination, and triumph that will leave you deeply moved. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to begin this incredible story and many more. Let's start today's journey. Megan stood at the foot of the grand staircase, the familiar marble steps feeling cold beneath her. The grandeur of the mansion, with its golden chandeliers and polished floors, had always made her feel small. But tonight, it wasn't the opulence that weighed her down, it was the pit in her stomach. Ethan had summoned her to his study, but something about his tone earlier felt off. 4 months now, he had been distant, his warmth replaced by a strange coldness that left Megan questioning everything. Her hand lingered on the smooth mahogany rail as she hesitated. She always knocked twice before entering his study, a small ritual they'd developed during their secret affair. But tonight, even that felt uncertain. A heavy sigh escaped her lips as she finally mustered the courage and knocked. Ethan's voice, sharp and devoid of emotion, answered from inside. "Come in." Pushing the door open, Megan stepped into the study. The air was heavy with the scent of leather and aged books. But something else lingered, an almost suffocating tension. Ethan stood by the window, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the backdrop of the Manhattan skyline. He didn't turn to face her. "Ethan, is everything okay?" Megan asked, her voice betraying the nervous flutter in her chest. For a moment, he didn't respond. When he finally did, his tone was clipped and emotionless. "We need to talk." Those 4 words hit Megan like a thunderbolt. Her pulse quickened as she tried to steady herself. "Talk about what? You've been so distant." "Did I do something wrong?" she asked, her voice faltering. Ethan turned then, and the look in his eyes made her heart sink. It wasn't the warm gaze that had once made her feel cherished. Instead, his expression was cold, almost detached. He walked over to the desk, picking up a glass of water he didn't drink from, and sighed heavily. Whatever this is between us, it needs to end," he said, his words slicing through the room like a blade. Megan felt the ground shift beneath her. "End? Ethan, what are you saying? Why?" Her voice cracked, but she pushed through, desperate to understand. Ethan ran a hand through his dark hair, visibly agitated. "I never should have let it get this far. I got involved with you because I was lonely, Megan. But let's be honest, you're a maid. We come from completely different worlds. Did you really think this could ever be serious?" The cruelty of his words made Megan's chest tighten. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You didn't think it was serious," she whispered, her voice trembling. "You made me believe there was something real between us." "Ethan, I never promised you anything," he interrupted, his tone harsher now. "You deluded yourself into thinking this was more than it was." Megan stared at him in disbelief. Each word felt like a hammer blow, breaking her spirit piece by piece. "So I was just convenient?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Ethan didn't answer immediately, but his silence was louder than any response. When he finally spoke, his voice was as cold as ever. "You don't belong in my world, Megan. You should have known that from the start. This was never going to last." Her legs felt weak, and she gripped the back of a chair to steady herself. "I can't believe you're saying this," she said, shaking her head. "I thought you cared about me. I thought." "Enough, Megan," Ethan snapped, his voice rising. "I've made up my mind. It's over. And, by the way, I want you out of the mansion by tomorrow. You're fired." The finality of his words struck like a death knell. Megan could barely breathe as the full weight of his betrayal sank in. Not only was he ending their relationship, But he was also stripping her of her livelihood, casting her out as if she were nothing. She straightened, forcing herself to meet his gaze one last time. "You think you can treat people like this because you have money and power," she said, her voice steady despite the tears that threatened to spill. "But one day, Ethan, you'll realize that those things don't make you a better person. They don't make you happy." With that, Megan turned and walked out of the study, her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. She didn't look back, even as the tears finally broke free and streamed down her cheeks. As she made her way back to her small quarters in the servants' wing, Megan replayed the conversation in her mind, each cruel word echoing like a haunting refrain. She had given so much of herself to Ethan, believing in the connection they shared, only to be discarded like she was nothing. The next morning, Megan packed her belongings, a few clothes, a photo of her late mother, and a notebook where she scribbled her dreams. Her hands trembled as she zipped up the worn suitcase that held her life. The staff avoided her, their pitying glances only adding to her humiliation. As she left the mansion for the last time, Megan vowed to herself that she would survive this. She didn't know how or where she would go, but she refused to let Ethan's cruelty define her. The New York streets stretched out before her, cold and unwelcoming, but somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination began to flicker. Weeks later, as Megan sat in the waiting room of a clinic, her hands clutching a pregnancy test, that spark was put to the test. When the doctor entered with a somber expression, Megan already knew what he was going to say. "You're pregnant," he confirmed, his voice gentle but firm. "And it's triplets." Megan's world spun. Triplets. Her mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. But one rose above all the others. How am I going to do this? Her chest tightened as fear and disbelief overwhelmed her. Ethan's rejection played in her mind once more. "He'll never help," she whispered to herself, tears slipping down her cheeks. "I'm completely alone." But even as despair threatened to consume her, that spark of determination burned brighter. She placed a hand on her stomach, her voice trembling but resolute. "We'll figure it out. I'll figure it out for you." Though the path ahead was uncertain, Megan knew she couldn't give up. These children, small as they were now her entire world. And for them, she would find a way to survive. The weeks after Megan learned about her pregnancy were a blur of uncertainty and fear. She had left the clinic with a sense of purpose, but the weight of what lay ahead soon bore down on her. New York City, with its relentless pace and indifference, felt even harsher now that she was alone, pregnant, and jobless. Each day was a battle to keep going, to find the strength to keep moving forward. Megan managed to find a small, run-down room in a cheap boarding house. It wasn't much, a single bed, a small table, and a cracked window that let in drafts of cold air, but it was better than the streets. She spent her days scouring the city for work, her growing belly making it harder to find employers willing to give her a chance. Most nights, she returned to her room exhausted, clutching a sandwich or an apple she'd managed to afford, her legs aching from walking miles. Yet, amidst the despair, she found herself whispering to the tiny lives inside her. "I'll take care of you," she promised. "No matter what. I'll find a way." It wasn't long before the pregnancy began to take a toll. Her body, already worn down from stress and malnourishment, struggled to keep up with the demands of carrying triplets. Megan woke up one morning with sharp pain in her back and an overwhelming sense of weakness. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't afford to get sick or take time off from searching for work. But her body wasn't giving her a choice. As the days turned into weeks, Megan's desperation grew. Rent was overdue, and the landlady's patience was wearing thin. Megan knew it was only a matter of time before she'd be evicted. The thought of being homeless while pregnant terrified her. "I can't let this happen," she whispered to herself, staring at the peeling paint on her walls. "I have to keep going." One evening, while walking home from another fruitless job search, Megan stumbled upon a small bakery with a help wanted sign taped to the window. The warm glow of the lights inside and the scent of freshly baked bread drew her in. She hesitated for a moment, brushing her hand over her stomach. "Let's try," she murmured before stepping inside. The bakery's owner, a kind older woman named Eleanor, looked up from behind the counter. She was arranging pastries on a tray when Megan approached, her heart pounding. "Hi. I saw the sign in the window," Megan began, her voice wavering. "Are you still looking for help?" Eleanor studied Megan for a moment, her sharp eyes taking in the young woman's worn appearance and the unmistakable curve of her belly. Megan braced herself for rejection, ready to hear the familiar excuse that her pregnancy made her unsuitable for the job. Instead, Eleanor smiled gently. "You've got good timing," she said. "Can you start tomorrow morning?" Megan's mouth fell open in shock. "Really? You're hiring me?" she asked, unable to believe her luck. Eleanor nodded. "You need the work, don't you? And I could use an extra pair of hands. We'll give it a try." Tears filled Megan's eyes as she stammered her gratitude. "Thank you. Thank you so much." The next morning, Megan began working at the bakery. The hours were long, and the work was physically demanding. But Eleanor's kindness made all the difference. The older woman never once questioned Megan's ability to work despite her pregnancy. Instead, she offered words of encouragement and made sure Megan took breaks when she needed them. "You've got a strong spirit," Eleanor said one afternoon as Megan carefully placed a tray of muffins in the display case. "It's not easy, what you're going through, but you're doing it." Megan felt a lump form in her throat at Eleanor's words. For the first time in weeks, she didn't feel invisible or judged. She felt seen. As the weeks went by, Megan began to find a rhythm. She saved every penny she earned, putting aside money for rent and food while dreaming of a better life for her children. Her body still ached, and the pregnancy was far from easy. But the bakery became her refuge, a place where she could momentarily forget the weight of her struggles. But life had a way of testing Megan's resilience. One evening, as she returned to her boarding house after a late shift, she found her belongings scattered outside the door. The landlady stood nearby, her arms crossed and her face stern. "I warned you, Megan," the woman said coldly. "No rent. No room." Megan felt her knees buckle. "Please," she begged, tears streaming down her face. "I just need a little more time. I'll pay everything, I swear." But the landlady shook her head. "I've heard it all before. You have to leave." With nowhere else to go, Megan gathered her meager belongings and walked into the night. The cold wind bit at her skin, and the weight of her suitcase made her shoulders ache. For hours, she wandered the streets, searching for shelter. Every step was a reminder of how alone she was. As dawn broke over the city, Megan found herself sitting on a bench in a quiet park. Exhaustion overwhelmed her, and she placed a protective hand over her stomach. "I'm so sorry," she whispered to her unborn children. "I'll figure this out. I promise." She didn't know how she'd keep that promise, but she refused to give up. Her children deserved better, and she was determined to give it to them no matter what. Megan's world felt as fragile as glass. Sitting on that park bench, cold and exhausted, she thought about the life she had envisioned for her children and how far she was from it. The city stirred around her as the morning light grew stronger, commuters rushing past without sparing her a glance. Her heart sank further. How had it come to this? But then she remembered Eleanor's kind face and the safe haven of the bakery. It wasn't much, but it was something. Megan decided she had to tell Eleanor what had happened. Maybe the older woman could point her toward resources, or at least offer a kind word to steady her fraying nerves. Carrying her belongings, Megan walked to the bakery. She arrived early, before the morning rush, and found Eleanor arranging trays of fresh bread. The warm scent of yeast and cinnamon filled the air, momentarily soothing Megan's anxiety. Eleanor looked up, and her brow furrowed when she saw Megan's disheveled appearance. "Megan, what's wrong?" she asked, setting down the tray she was holding. Megan hesitated, ashamed to admit her circumstances. But there was no hiding it. I got evicted last night, she said, her voice trembling. I don't have anywhere to go. Eleanor's face softened with concern. She pulled out a chair. Sit down. Sweetheart. You must be exhausted. As Megan lowered herself into the chair, she felt a wave of relief. She wasn't alone, not completely. Eleanor placed a steaming cup of tea in front of her and sat down across the table. Why didn't you tell me things were this bad? Eleanor asked gently. I didn't want to bother you, Megan admitted, staring down at the cup. You've already done so much for me by giving me this job. Eleanor reached out and placed her hand over Megan's. Sometimes we need to lean on others. Megan. There's no shame in that. You're not just my employee, you're part of this little bakery family now. Tears welled up in Megan's eyes. Eleanor's words were like a balm for her battered spirit. Thank you, she whispered. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, thinking. I might have a solution, she said after a moment. I have a spare room at my house. It's nothing fancy, but it's warm. And you'd have a proper roof over your head. You can stay there until you're back on your feet. Megan's eyes widened. Eleanor. I couldn't impose on you like that. You're not imposing. Eleanor said firmly. You're doing what any strong person would do, accepting help when it's needed. Besides, I could use some company at my age. The house gets lonely. Megan hesitated, torn between pride and gratitude. But the thought of having a safe place for her babies finally tipped the scales. Thank you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I don't know how to repay you. Repay me by taking care of yourself and those little ones. Eleanor replied with a smile. Now, finish that tea. We've got work to do. Over the next few days, Megan moved into Eleanor's home. It was a cozy, welcoming space filled with warm colors and little touches that spoke of Eleanor's personality, photographs on the mantel, handmade quilts draped over the furniture, and shelves lined with cookbooks. Megan felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in months. The spare room was small but comfortable. Eleanor had already made it up with fresh linens and a small vase of flowers on the nightstand. Megan couldn't help but cry when she saw it. For the first time in a long time, she felt safe. Living with Eleanor brought unexpected joys. The older woman became a confidant and a source of wisdom. They spent evenings together, talking over tea and sharing stories. Eleanor would recount tales from her younger years, and Megan would share her hopes and fears for the future. One evening, as they sat together in the kitchen, Megan asked, Eleanor, how do you stay so positive? You've been through so much, but you're always so kind and calm. Eleanor smiled. Life hasn't always been easy, but I've learned that kindness goes a long way. When you help someone, it doesn't just lift them, it lifts you too. And, my dear, you've got plenty of kindness in you. I can see it. Megan thought about Eleanor's words as she lay in bed that night. Maybe it was true. Maybe she still had enough strength to turn things around, not just for her children, but for herself. The bakery became a lifeline in more ways than one. Megan threw herself into the work, grateful for the distraction and the sense of purpose it gave her. As her belly grew and her energy waned, Eleanor adjusted her responsibilities, allowing her to focus on tasks she could manage. The regular customers began to notice Megan's dedication, and many struck up conversations with her, offering words of encouragement. A few even slipped her small gifts, a warm scarf, a jar of homemade jam, a knitted blanket for the babies. The kindness of strangers warmed her heart and reminded her that not everyone in the world was indifferent. One customer in particular, a man named Daniel who came in every morning for coffee and a croissant, started leaving larger tips than usual. For the little ones, he'd say with a wink before heading out the door. Megan found herself looking forward to his visits. His cheerful presence a bright spot in her day. For the first time in a long time, Megan began to feel hopeful. Her life was far from perfect, and the challenges ahead were daunting. But she was beginning to believe that she could face them and that she didn't have to do it alone. Megan's days settled into a rhythm at Eleanor's house. Every morning, she woke early, feeling the quiet weight of her pregnancy as she prepared for the day. The bakery was a sanctuary, and Eleanor's unwavering support became the foundation Megan leaned on as she navigated her new reality. The triplets were growing steadily, their tiny movements becoming stronger and more frequent. Every flutter and kick reminded Megan of the profound responsibility she carried. It wasn't just her life anymore, her choices now shaped the lives of three little beings who relied entirely on her strength. One afternoon, as Megan arranged loaves of bread on a display, the bell above the bakery door chimed. She looked up to see Daniel, the cheerful regular, stepping inside. He offered his usual warm smile and nodded as he approached the counter. "Good afternoon, Megan," he said, his tone as easygoing as ever. "It smells incredible in here. What's the special today?" "Cinnamon raisin bread," Megan replied, her lips curling into a shy smile. "Eleanor just pulled it out of the oven." Daniel leaned forward, inhaling the rich aroma. "I'll take a loaf," he said, sliding a few bills across the counter. As Megan wrapped the bread, he added, "And how are you doing today? You look tired." Megan hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate the kindness, but opening up to someone felt risky. Yet something in Daniel's genuine demeanor encouraged her to be honest. "I'm managing," she said softly. "Some days are harder than others. But I'm lucky to have Eleanor." Daniel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "Eleanor's one of a kind. And so are you, Megan. It takes a lot of courage to keep going when things get tough." Megan felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to compliments, especially from someone like Daniel, who seemed to have everything together. She handed him the wrapped loaf, and as he took it, his hand brushed hers briefly. "If you ever need anything, just let me know," he said before turning to leave. The doorbell chimed as he exited, and Megan stood still for a moment, holding her breath. There was something about Daniel's presence that lingered, a small ember of warmth in her otherwise turbulent world. Later that evening, as Megan helped Eleanor tidy up, she found herself sharing the interaction. "Daniel's always so kind," she said, trying to sound casual. "I don't think I've met anyone like him before." Eleanor looked up from where she was wiping the counter, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "He's a good man. That one. Been coming here for years. But lately, I think he's been stopping by just to see you." Megan laughed, brushing off the suggestion. "He's just being polite." "Eleanor." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "Polite doesn't explain the way he looks at you, dear. There's kindness. Yes. But there's something more there. You deserve to let someone care about you. You know." Megan's laughter faded as Eleanor's words settled over her. Could it be true? The idea felt impossible after all she'd been through. Opening her heart to someone seemed unthinkable. But Eleanor's wisdom often proved right. And Megan couldn't deny that Daniel's presence had a way of lifting her spirits. As the weeks passed, Daniel continued to visit the bakery, each encounter a small moment of light in Megan's day. He asked questions about her baking, shared funny anecdotes from his life, and slowly chipped away at the walls she had built around herself. She found herself looking forward to their conversations, her nervousness giving way to a tentative sense of ease. One rainy afternoon, Daniel lingered at the counter longer than usual. "Megan," he began, his voice hesitant, "would you like to have dinner with me sometime? I know things are complicated, but I'd really like to get to know you better." Megan's heart skipped a beat. Her first instinct was to decline, to retreat to the safety of her routine and avoid the vulnerability that came with saying yes. But as she looked into Daniel's earnest eyes, she felt something stir, a tiny spark of hope, a reminder that she was more than her struggles. "I don't know if I'm ready," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel nodded, his expression understanding. "That's okay. Take your time. Just know the offer stands." After he left, Megan sat in the quiet bakery, her thoughts racing. Could she really allow herself to move forward? To open up to someone new? The questions weighed on her. But so did the memory of Daniel's kindness. Perhaps, she thought, it was time to let herself believe in the possibility of happiness again. That night, as she lay in bed, she felt the triplets moving and placed her hands on her belly. "I'll do my best," she whispered to them. "For you and for me." The storm outside faded into a gentle drizzle. And for the first time in months, Megan allowed herself to dream of a future that wasn't defined by fear or regret. It was just a glimmer, but it was enough to guide her forward. Megan woke the next morning to the soft hum of rain against the windowpane. Eleanor was already in the kitchen, humming a tune as she prepared breakfast. The comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and Megan felt a rare moment of calm as she padded into the room. "Good morning, dear." Eleanor greeted her with a warm smile. "How are you and those little ones today?" Megan placed a hand on her growing belly, feeling a faint kick in response. "We're doing okay," she said, her voice softer than usual. The previous day's conversation with Daniel lingered in her mind, and she found herself grappling with mixed emotions. Eleanor placed a plate of toast and eggs in front of Megan and sat down across from her. "You've been quiet since yesterday," she said gently, her perceptive eyes studying Megan. "Care to share what's on your mind?" Megan hesitated, unsure of how to articulate the swirl of thoughts and feelings that had kept her awake the night before. Finally, she admitted, "Daniel asked me to dinner." Eleanor's smile widened, and she reached across the table to squeeze Megan's hand. "And what did you say?" "I didn't say yes," Megan replied, her voice heavy with doubt. "I don't even know if I'm ready for something like that. What if it's too soon? What if I can't trust myself to make the right choice?" Eleanor's expression softened, and she nodded knowingly. "It's natural to feel that way, Megan. After everything you've been through, it's hard to imagine opening your heart again. But sometimes, healing means taking a leap of faith." Megan mulled over Eleanor's words as she ate her breakfast. Could she take that leap? The thought both terrified and intrigued her. There was a part of her that wanted to believe in the possibility of happiness, even if it felt distant and uncertain. Later that day, Megan returned to the bakery to prepare for the weekend rush. As she kneaded dough and arranged pastries in the display case, she found herself thinking about the future. The bakery had become her safe haven, a place where she could focus on something tangible and build a life for herself and her children. But was it enough? Could she dare to hope for more? Just as Megan was lost in thought, the bell above the door rang, and Daniel stepped inside, shaking off the rain from his umbrella. His presence brought a sense of warmth to the room, and Megan felt her nerves flutter as he approached the counter. "Hello again," he said with a sheepish grin. "I think I'm becoming your most loyal customer." Megan laughed softly, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You might be. I should start naming the pastries after you." Daniel chuckled and placed an order for a few items. As she wrapped his purchase, he hesitated before speaking. "About yesterday, I didn't mean to put any pressure on you. I really enjoy talking to you, Megan. But I understand if you're not ready." His words were sincere, and Megan felt a pang of guilt for doubting his intentions. "It's not you," she said quickly. "I've just been through a lot, and I don't want to make any decisions lightly." Daniel nodded, his expression understanding. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." As he left, Megan watched him walk into the rain, his umbrella bobbing through the drizzle. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Maybe she could let someone in. Maybe it was time to believe in herself again. That evening, as Megan sat in the living room with Eleanor, she found herself opening up more than she had in months. She shared her fears about the triplets, her doubts about her ability to be a good mother, and her apprehension about trusting Daniel. Eleanor listened patiently, her wise eyes never leaving Megan's face. When she finally spoke, Her voice was calm and steady. "Megan, you've faced more challenges than most people could handle. And you've done it with grace. You're stronger than you realize. And as for Daniel, I see the way he looks at you. He's not trying to take anything from you, he just wants to be there for you." Megan let Eleanor's words sink in as she stared at the flickering light of the fireplace. She thought about everything she had endured. From the betrayal that had upended her life to the unexpected gift of the triplets growing inside her. She had fought so hard to build a new life. And maybe it was time to stop fighting against the possibility of joy. The next morning, Megan made a decision. She called Daniel and agreed to meet him for dinner. Her voice trembled as she spoke. But she felt a quiet resolve take root in her heart. It wasn't about starting over or forgetting the past, it was about giving herself permission to move forward. When the evening arrived, Megan found herself standing in front of her closet. Unsure of what to wear, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, a knowing smile on her face. "Need some help?" Megan laughed nervously. "I feel like I've forgotten how to do this." Eleanor stepped forward, pulling a soft, flowing dress from the rack. "This one," she said. "It's simple, elegant, and perfect for tonight." As Megan slipped into the dress and caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror, she felt a spark of confidence she hadn't felt in years. Tonight wasn't just about dinner, it was about reclaiming a part of herself she thought she had lost. When Daniel arrived to pick her up, his face lit up as he saw her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. Megan smiled, her heart fluttering with nerves and anticipation. As they walked to the car, she felt the rain begin to lift, the clouds parting to reveal a quiet, starry sky. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to believe that brighter days lay ahead. Dinner with Daniel was at a quaint Italian restaurant on the edge of town. A place with soft lighting and the faint aroma of garlic and fresh basil lingering in the air. Megan sat across from him, her hands fidgeting slightly as she unfolded her napkin. The table between them was small and intimate, the kind of setting that left no room for distractions. She was out of her comfort zone, but there was a part of her that felt drawn to this moment. Daniel smiled warmly, sensing her unease. "You don't have to be nervous, Megan. It's just dinner, no pressure. No expectations." His reassurance softened her nerves, and she managed a small smile in return. "It's been a long time since I've done anything like this," she admitted. "Honestly, I wasn't sure if I'd ever do it again." Daniel's expression grew thoughtful. "I can't imagine what you've been through. But I admire your strength. You've built a life for yourself and your children, it's something to be proud of." Hearing those words felt like a balm to Megan's bruised spirit. She had been so focused on surviving and taking care of the triplets that she rarely stopped to acknowledge her own resilience. For the first time, she allowed herself to feel a glimmer of pride in what she had accomplished. As the evening unfolded, their conversation flowed more easily. Daniel spoke about his childhood in the Midwest, his love for architecture, and the winding journey that had brought him to this small town. Megan found herself drawn to his easy laughter and the way he spoke with passion about his work. It was refreshing to be around someone who wasn't burdened by pretense or judgment. When the food arrived, Megan realized she hadn't felt this at ease in years. The rich flavors of the pasta mingled with the warmth of Daniel's company, and she let herself relax. For the first time, she felt like she was more than just a mother, more than someone defined by her past. She was Megan, whole, flawed, and deserving of happiness. "Can I ask you something?" Daniel said, breaking her thoughts. "Of course," Megan replied, setting her fork down. "What made you want to open a bakery?" he asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Your pastries are incredible, but I feel like there's a story behind it." Megan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Baking was something my mom and I used to do together. It was our way of bonding, trying out new recipes, making a mess in the kitchen, laughing when things didn't turn out quite right. After she passed away, I stopped for a while. It was too painful." But when everything fell apart she paused, taking a steadying breath. When I was left on my own, I needed something to ground me. Baking brought me back to life in a way. Daniel listened intently, his gaze never leaving hers. That's beautiful, he said softly. It's amazing how something as simple as baking can carry so much meaning. Megan nodded, feeling a pang of nostalgia mixed with gratitude. It's more than baking. It's a connection to her, to the parts of my life that were good. And now, it's my way of providing for my kids. It gives me a sense of purpose. Daniel's admiration was evident in his expression. Your kids are lucky to have a mom like you. The sincerity in his voice made Megan's heart ache in the best possible way. She wasn't used to being seen, truly seen. And Daniel's words made her feel a little less alone. As the night drew to a close, Daniel walked Megan back to her car. The air was cool and crisp, the earlier rain leaving the streets slick and shimmering under the streetlights. They stood by her car for a moment, the silence between them comfortable. I had a great time tonight, Daniel said, his voice warm. Thank you for saying yes. Megan smiled, her nerves replaced by a quiet contentment. I did too. I wasn't sure how this would go, but I'm glad I came. Daniel hesitated for a moment before asking, would you be open to doing this again sometime? Megan's first instinct was to retreat, to let fear dictate her response. But then she thought of Eleanor's words, of the strength she had shown in starting over. Maybe it was time to take another step forward. I think I would, she said, her voice steady. But no promises. I'm still figuring things out. Daniel nodded, his understanding evident. That's more than enough for me. As he leaned in to say goodnight, Megan felt the unexpected brush of his hand against hers. It was a small gesture, but it sent a spark through her that she hadn't felt in years. She watched him walk away, his figure disappearing into the glow of the streetlights. And for the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of possibility. When Megan returned home, Eleanor was waiting in the living room with a knowing smile. How was it? She asked, her voice filled with curiosity. It was nice, Megan said, her cheeks warming. Eleanor grinned. Just nice. That doesn't sound like the whole story. Megan laughed, sitting down beside her. Okay. It was more than nice. But I'm taking things slow. I have to. Eleanor nodded, her expression full of pride. Good. You deserve to take all the time you need. But I'm glad you're letting yourself feel something again. Megan thought about that as she prepared for bed. The evening had been more than just a dinner, it had been a reminder that life could hold more than struggle and heartache. As she lay in bed, her hand resting protectively on her belly, she let herself imagine a future that was brighter, fuller, and filled with the love she had always dreamed of. The weeks following Megan's dinner with Daniel passed in a whirlwind of activity. The bakery thrived, as orders for cakes and pastries poured in, and Megan found herself juggling the demands of her growing business with the everyday challenges of raising the triplets. But amidst the chaos, there was a newfound lightness in her heart. She had started allowing herself to hope again, to dream of a life that wasn't solely about survival. Daniel had been true to his word, showing up in small but meaningful ways. He'd drop by the bakery on quiet afternoons, bringing coffee and sharing stories about his latest architectural projects. Sometimes, he'd even help with the triplets, his easygoing nature making them laugh as he played peekaboo or told silly jokes. Megan found herself looking forward to his visits, though she was careful not to let her feelings get ahead of her. One evening, as the triplets were tucked into bed and the house was finally quiet, Megan sat at the kitchen table with Eleanor, sipping tea and reflecting on how much her life had changed. He's good with the kids, Megan said, her tone thoughtful. They light up when he's around. Eleanor nodded, a knowing smile on her lips. And what about you, my dear? Do you light up when he's around? Megan hesitated, stirring her tea absently. It's not that simple. I've been through so much, I can't just dive into something new. What if I get hurt again? Eleanor reached across the table, placing a comforting hand on Megan's. You've learned so much from what you've been through. You're stronger now. Wiser. That doesn't mean you have to shut the door on love forever. Megan sighed. Her thoughts a tangle of fear and longing. I just want to be careful. For me and for the kids. Being careful is smart. Eleanor said gently. But don't let fear keep you from living. You deserve happiness. Megan. Don't forget that. Her words stayed with Megan long after Eleanor had gone to bed. As she cleaned up the kitchen and checked on the triplets one last time, she couldn't shake the feeling that maybe, just maybe, it was time to open her heart a little more. One Saturday morning, Daniel invited Megan and the triplets to join him at the park for a picnic. The day was sunny and warm, the kind of perfect spring day that felt like a gift. Megan packed a small bag with snacks, diapers, and toys, feeling both nervous and excited about spending more time with him outside of the bakery. When they arrived, Daniel had already set up a blanket under a sprawling oak tree. He greeted them with a warm smile, helping Megan unload the stroller and settle the triplets on the grass. The babies gurgled happily, their tiny hands reaching for the colorful toys Daniel had brought. This is lovely, Megan said as she sat down beside him, the gentle breeze rustling her hair. Thank you for inviting us. Daniel shrugged modestly. I just thought it'd be nice for all of us to get out and enjoy the sunshine. Plus, I can't get enough of these little guys, they're too cute. Megan laughed, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and affection. They are pretty special, aren't they? As the morning turned into afternoon, the conversation flowed effortlessly. Daniel shared stories from his childhood, describing summers spent building treehouses with his brothers and the mischief they'd get into. Megan found herself laughing more than she had in years. The sound unfamiliar but wonderful. When it was time to eat, Daniel surprised her by unpacking a homemade meal he'd prepared, sandwiches, fresh fruit, and even a small batch of cookies he'd baked himself. You baked? Megan asked, raising an eyebrow in playful disbelief. I tried, Daniel said with a sheepish grin. But I'm pretty sure they don't hold a candle to your pastries. She took a bite of a cookie, her expression softening. They're good, she said sincerely. You might just give me some competition. Daniel laughed, the sound rich and genuine. I doubt that. But I'm glad you like them. As they ate, Megan noticed how naturally Daniel interacted with the triplets. He held them with ease, his movements confident and gentle. When one of the babies started fussing, he rocked them until they settled, his calm demeanor a soothing presence. Watching him, Megan felt a tug at her heart. She had been so focused on protecting herself that she hadn't allowed herself to fully see what was in front of her, a man who was kind, patient, and genuinely invested in her and her children. It was a realization that scared her as much as it comforted her. After the picnic, as the triplets napped in their stroller and the park grew quieter, Daniel turned to Megan, his expression serious but warm. I know I've said this before, but I want you to know that I'm here for you, Megan. Not just as a friend, but as someone who really cares about you and your kids. I'm not trying to rush anything, I just want you to know where I stand. Megan's breath caught, the weight of his words sinking in. She looked at him, searching his face for any hint of insincerity, but found none. He was being honest, vulnerable, and it touched something deep within her. Thank you, she said softly. That means a lot to me. I don't know what the future holds, but I appreciate your patience. It's been a long time since I felt like I could trust someone. Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. As they packed up and headed back to their cars, Megan felt a quiet sense of hope blooming in her chest. It wasn't a promise, but it was a beginning, a chance to heal, to trust, and to let herself imagine a future where love was possible again. The weeks following the picnic felt different for Megan. It was as if a door she had cautiously kept locked was beginning to creak open. She wasn't ready to rush through it. But the light streaming in gave her a glimmer of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. Daniel continued to be a steady presence in her life, showing up not just for her but for the triplets. He would stop by the bakery, offering to lend a hand during busy afternoons. Or he'd come over in the evenings to help feed the babies. His easy charm a balm for Megan's tired soul. Each moment chipped away at the walls she had carefully built around her heart. One Friday evening, after a particularly busy day at the bakery, Daniel showed up with pizza and a bottle of wine. Megan, exhausted but grateful, invited him in. The triplets were already asleep, and the house was unusually quiet. They sat at the small kitchen table, the warm light from the overhead lamp casting a cozy glow. "You've been working yourself to the bone," Daniel said, handing her a slice of pizza. "You need to take a break sometimes." Megan gave a tired laugh, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "A break? What's that? I have 3 babies, a business to run, and a pile of bills that doesn't seem to get any smaller. There's no time for breaks." Daniel leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "You're incredible. You know that. Most people would have crumbled under half of what you've been through. But here you are, standing tall and making it all work." His words caught her off guard. She looked at him, trying to gauge if he really meant it. But his expression was sincere, and she felt a warmth spread through her chest. "Thank you," she said softly. "It's not easy. But I don't really have a choice. Do I? The kids need me, and I need to keep moving forward for them." Daniel nodded, his gaze steady. "I get that. But you don't have to do it all alone. Megan, you've built this incredible life for your kids, and you should be proud of that. But let people help you when you need it. You're not superhuman." Megan smiled, though tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. She hated admitting how much she craved support, how tired she truly was. But Daniel's presence had become a source of comfort. And for once, she felt like she didn't have to carry the weight of the world on her shoulders alone. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the wine loosening some of Megan's tension. As they finished the meal, Daniel glanced at her with a mischievous glint in his eyes. "So," he said, leaning forward, "what do you say to a real break? A day off? Just you and me?" Megan raised an eyebrow, her lips curving into a wry smile. "A day off? You mean, leave the kids and the bakery and just do nothing? That sounds like a fairy tale." Daniel chuckled. "Exactly. Every hardworking hero deserves a fairy tale day once in a while. We could go to the coast, take a walk on the beach, grab some seafood. Just a few hours to breathe." The idea was both tempting and terrifying. Megan couldn't remember the last time she had done something purely for herself. Her life revolved around the triplets and the bakery, and the thought of stepping away felt indulgent. "I don't know," she said hesitantly. "What about the kids? I can't just leave them." Daniel smiled, his expression gentle. "Eleanor can watch them for a few hours. I'm sure she'd love the extra time with them. And you deserve this, Megan. You really do." Megan hesitated, her mind racing with reasons to say no. But deep down, she knew he was right. She did deserve it, even if it was just for a little while. "Okay," she said finally, a small smile playing on her lips. "But just a few hours. I don't think I'd survive being away from the babies much longer than that." Daniel's face lit up with excitement. "Perfect. I'll pick you up Sunday morning." Sunday came faster than Megan expected. She spent the morning feeling both nervous and excited, unsure of what to expect. Eleanor assured her the triplets would be fine, shooing her out the door with a knowing smile. When Daniel arrived, his easygoing demeanor immediately put her at ease. They drove to the coast, the winding road offering stunning views of the ocean. For the first time in a long time, Megan allowed herself to relax. The sound of the waves crashing against the shore and the salty breeze on her face felt like a balm for her soul. They walked along the beach, their conversation flowing effortlessly. Megan found herself opening up to Daniel in ways she hadn't expected, sharing stories about her childhood and her dreams for the future. He listened intently, his responses thoughtful and kind. As the day went on, Megan realized how much she enjoyed Daniel's company. He made her laugh, challenged her to dream, and reminded her of the person she used to be before life became so heavy. When they finally returned home, Megan felt lighter, as if a part of her had been restored. She thanked Daniel, her gratitude genuine and heartfelt. "That's what friends are for," he said, his smile warm. But as their eyes met, Megan couldn't help but wonder if they were becoming something more. As the sun set on Megan's bustling bakery, the soft laughter of her triplets filled the air, blending with the warm aroma of freshly baked pastries. Life hadn't been easy, but Megan had found her way through challenges she once thought insurmountable. Her bakery was thriving, her children were happy, and she had built a life filled with love and purpose. Daniel remained a steady presence, offering support and friendship that sometimes felt like the beginnings of something deeper. Yet, Megan had learned to treasure each moment without rushing into the future. For now, her heart was full, focused on the life she had rebuilt. Eleanor, her steadfast ally, watched with pride as Megan and her children flourished. Together, they had turned hardship into hope, and the once fragile foundation of Megan's life now stood strong. As the day drew to a close, Megan tucked her children into bed, whispering promises of a bright tomorrow. Standing by the window, watching the stars, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. If you were moved by this story, subscribe to Life Stories for more heartfelt tales. Your support helps us continue sharing these narratives of resilience and hope. See you in the next story.